G'day folks, Mark here again. I wanted to do a video about our gun reforms and I suppose a bit of a, I don't know whether it's a catch up or it's keep up with or let people know. Other side of the country, I think just now we're coming into where the New South Wales new firearms reforms, gun restrictions, gun steal back, buyback, whatever you want to call it, is supposed to be being enactuated. So something that after Bondi, for those that don't know, the brief description, after Bondi, the federal government came in what they wanted to put right across Australia. The only state that agreed with that was New South Wales, and now the time's up on that side of things. There were supposed to be other things happening. It largely hasn't gone the way the federal government wanted, but it's still in play, and don't forget that it's in play. And I suppose, you know, for us in Western Australia, there's a degree of we've been through it. It's been pretty horrible, but I wouldn't actually say through it where it's happened. The first level of what we've seen's happened. I certainly have reservations about where things are going to stay and if things are going to keep going because of the general death of 1,000 cuts that we've been through, and I suspect that more will come in the not too distant future in the way of gun restrictions or disarming the population. Over here in Western Australia, a lot of people are sort of just carrying on now. They've been through the pain. The people in the firearms who stayed in the firearms, people have been through the pain, and this is the new norm, is that sort of stuff, and don't want to talk about it so much, been worn out. There's a lot of people that have been disarmed, all firearms taken away, all reasons, for various reasons, various bits and pieces in these very diabolical rules that have been put forward as gun reform, and have really been hurt by it. So a lot of people have just stepped away and given up the fight and had no choice, and been disarmed through various things, and whether that's through someone they might know. So there's all sorts of fashions where they can, with your opinion or the people you associate with, have yourself disarmed. Businesses have been shut down, all sorts of stuff to happen, and there's more of that to come, mark my words. It's just sort of starting in New South Wales, and really the murmurings, there is state governments that have resisted the plays afoot, and there will be over years to come more and more of this to come, or it'll keep on going. I suppose really what I want to talk about there is the conversation dying down is not something I'm really comfortable with. I get we're all sort of exhausted with it. It's sort of hard to have to put up with and listen to a degree, but it is a lot worse, as I've mentioned many times, more than just the bringing in a number of firearms and sensible gun reforms or anything like that. It is a lot worse than that in the actions of it. And I suppose really what I wanted to do is give people, go back to basics a little bit of what's actually happening, why it's actually happening, and for conversations you can have with people. That has always been the thing that's wrong here is the gun community, the people who understand this is unreasonable to limit firearms. Then conversations like, well, if we're going to limit our firearms, they're going to limit their golf clubs. Is that? And they're not saying we should take golf clubs away, but it's or pairs of shoes away, or number of cars away, or any other things. What we're more saying is, why did the government have any say in how many of something you have? Whether you have one or you have 100, it doesn't make you more dangerous as a firearms owner whatsoever. You weren't dangerous to start off with. But our logic comes from that place. And what actual fact is, the majority of Australians have already been scared, convinced, scared, intimidated, propaganded into guns are bad. Guns are bad. Guns are on the street, and gun owners have got them on the street, and you've got to get them off the streets. And that's the catch fry, which I'm hearing again, which is laughable. It absolutely is laughable to hear Chris Minns, the Premier from New South Wales, going, got to get the guns off the streets. They're not getting the guns off the streets, of course. You know, same as every politician, it's the get the guns off the street. They're not on the streets. They're not the guns that are on the streets are in criminals' hands, and criminals aren't giving them in. That's really simple. But what's the actual logic? And I suppose what's the disconnect? We say you shouldn't take our guns to a person who've already been convinced the guns are bad, with no other real sound logic other than, they might come and limit your golf clubs, that doesn't really resonate with anyone. It's a case of, you're just a gun nut, or you're just a gun person, and I don't like guns, so I don't really care. So there is the logic of, which from their perspective, they've already been convinced guns are bad, and they don't really see any argument other than you just don't want your stuff taken. And my stuff isn't illegal, and your stuff sort of is, so I don't see your argument. Or you, like I said, you're just a gun nut, or wherever it is. There's no real connection. So there's some things that I think the conversation should go with in a more sensible fashion. And that would start with, why do they want to take the guns? Why do they want to disarm the population? We know the UN, lots of years ago, set up a plan to disarm the population. They call it actually more gun reform and more restrictions and that sort of stuff, but ultimately, we read between the lines, they want to disarm the population. There's not a grey area about that. Anyone who's researched that properly understands that. So why do they want to do that, and why do our politicians want to do that? And yes, our political class over here are right in line. They're signatories to the UN, so they're on the same page there, but why do they want to do that? And I suppose that is, if you want to research and ask what the UN say, well, they'll say it's simply for limiting gun violence, for limiting domestic violence, for stopping, if you have less firearms owned by licensed individuals, then the illegal firearms owners, the people go and steal them, will have less source to them. So these are all they have small numbers of connotations or connections to statistics. They're not very well linked to statistics whatsoever. And the big strategy of the statistics actually is, so you're saying if you remove all the guns from licensed firearms owners, whether you're allowed to use them for self-defense or you're not, doesn't really matter in a situation when you need self-defense. If you've got nothing, if you've got something, legal or not, you can protect yourself. If you've got nothing, you're waiting for the police, well, you can't protect yourself until the 20 minutes later when the police show up, and then they just start writing the police report. And your defense, well, that isn't really relevant in that conversation. So taking away from them and leaving the world, I don't know the numbers, but it's going to be in excess of 100 million illegal firearms through this world. Our government says there's well over 1 million illegal firearms in this world, and that's what they claim. The number's going to be a lot higher. So you're going to take it away from us and leave it with them because it's already against the law. There's no law to say we've got an extra law that means you've really got to do it now. No, the criminals aren't going to hand them in. So it's making us defenseless. So that is not going to help with crime. That is not going to help with violent crime. That is actually only going to make it worse. That's quite obvious. They have it, we don't. We become easier to attack. So there's that side of things, which doesn't make any sense. You can also we can talk about castle law and what you should be able to do and shouldn't be able to do. That's another conversation, whether you should have the right to have a firearm in Australia to defend yourself as our country gets more violent, as we import more violence in various ways and create more violence by creating more division, by higher cost of living, by all the disparities that are actually being brought on under the brackets of diversity and inclusion. We're getting the opposite. Yeah, that's a real argument. But I would step back another place. If you also look at the same time, is we can see in real time our police forces and our governments becoming more and more militarized, actually, but arming themselves a lot more. The likes of police officers in full SWAT gear, or pretty much black versions of stormtroopers, that's really common in armoured vehicles that actually have a hit squad to go and take out whatever. We don't hear about gunfights with those people. That's, if happened at all, very, very rarely. We have this very militarised police forces that is showing up all over the place. They talk about fighting organised crime, and we find organised crime is too often, and more often than not, embedded with government. They don't do things with guns, they just embezzle money. They just organise funds in various places, and real organised crime don't fight things with guns. So there is a bit of a subterfuge going on here. We have a very obvious thing that anyone, and be that whichever side of politics you are, you should be able to see. We have the police force being more and more armed, and we are literally disarming the population. And it's just gun reforms, those gun reforms mean less guns, harder to use guns, more restrictions on guns. So in every sense, you are disarming the population. So there then becomes an uneven balance of power. Now, which is very obvious. And people would say, then the argument will come back. Well, what is a civilians going to do against your army, against your police force, against your army? There's no way you could win that fight. Well, they're right. In an out-and-out war, at this stage, yeah, I would probably, I don't know this, maybe if we had which is never even conceivable, if you had the 6 million or however many million gun owners there are in Australia that fought against our army, there's more of them, okay, maybe that's it. That's not going to happen, of course. We're not set up with planes and tanks and things to be able to fight any real war. That's not what this is about. It's much more about the mindset, the ability to resist, the ability to be non-compliant when the rules don't make sense. When what the government is trying to do doesn't make sense, then the ability to be non-compliant. And that comes with, yeah, to some degree or another, some of your population is armed. It comes actually with that power balance. If you have a very heavily armed government and police force, and you have a largely or completely disarmed population, they say jump, you say how high. What's your choice? You're just going to what? Not eat? You're going to do a starvation thing when they're threatening to use military force against you or police force against you? You don't really have an argument. So compliance is the way. Now you can say that's far-fetched and that's ridiculous. Well, except for history, of course, says that's exactly how it happens. In socialist, communist takeovers of countries that have happened before now, National Socialists and the Nazis, or all these things that happened in communist China, that sort of stuff, that's actually what happened. Mao's Long March, well, they actually used the military forces to go through and kill millions of people that wouldn't comply. Now, I'm not suggesting that would happen, but it's the same power dynamic, which is in play all over our Western world. That is in play, and that is indisputable. So is it the same thing? Yeah, you'd have to ask, where you have a government that is growing flat out and the state being the thing that is more and more in control. It wants to employ more people, it wants to own more stuff, it wants to keep more in control of everything. There's more and more that road of a little bit heading down the road of you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, meaning the state will own it, the corporations will own it. And how do you force that sort of stuff in? Well, you force that stuff in with authoritarianism, and you do that with a mindset thing. So you need a big, powerful police force, a big, powerful government, and a compliant population. And here's one of the other keys that people don't get, is the compliant population is the key ingredient. They're the ones that'll dob each other in. They're the ones that'll go the extra mile and we'll do this extra because then we'll be good and then we'll get credits in a no more than a mental sense. We'll do the right things, so we all start pushing ourselves. That's how it always happens. They don't actually need to even point the guns our way because we've become so compliant. We want to do the right thing so much. So and the we is not all of us. It is the hall monitors, the people that are maybe more scared than the others that force everyone else to do it because they might dob you in, which is also what we see happening. More and more of this online dobbers, online keep you all under the brackets of safety. So we see it all the time, but that's part of the dynamic that's in play. That's part of why you disarm the population. There's another really obvious thing, which comes back to the fundamentals of how our governments now operate, and that is doing the right thing is not really what a government's about anymore. Not our modern form of government that we have at the moment. Certainly not our uni-party system. What they do is everything they possibly can to be in power. So the ends is justified by the means. They will do everything to do it. So votes. So the best way to get votes and the best way to get voted in, which is certainly what we're up to, McGowan did over here very much so, is found a situation where for him COVID worked brilliantly. Because he had a scared population and he did things and he presented things where he was saving the population, where he was protecting the population. He wasn't at all, actually. Turns out there was a lot of lies, whether he knew the lies or didn't know the lies, but there were a lot of lies in there. But that's what gave the Labor Party such strength, is this process of the lies, or the keeping people scared through well, yes, lies, misinformations, basically exactly the same thing that happened the next time round, which they were using the firearms for. And it'll be a degree of what's actually going on with the Labor Party in both federally and the New South Wales, where they see they've got big issues, and one of the ways they can fix things is by they're working with the same strategy that's been around for a long time. Guns are bad, guns are scary, we'll protect you from the guns. So we'll take the guns from the minority, which are the bad guys, we've already told you all that, and to take them away and get more control of them to protect you, our voter. So we're saving you. So votes, yeah, votes is the other key ingredient. Votes are the immediate one that our politicians trip over to really, really quickly. The bigger picture, the control, all that sort of stuff, to be honest, yeah, some of our politicians be onto it. Most of them aren't up to it that much. They're much more worried about whether it's where they're going to spend holidays or getting voted back in and being popular and trying to get in the right place in their party to have more power, to try and make sure the party's voted in. That's what they're focused on. So they're focused on the votes. The bigger picture than that, whether that's the Fabians, whether that's the UN, whether that's the WEF, or whether the driving force comes in the way of the disarming the population, that is about the control. That is about having a compliant population, and those strategies are impossible to deny. You cannot have a militarizing of a police force, which we see all over our country, and all about our safety. Well, is it? It's actually about a very, very clear message to us on the other side, the compliant, be more compliant, or else. And that's pretty much the conversation. So I don't think it's a good way forward. It's certainly not about freedom. It's certainly about state power, is what is very, very clearly in place here. But those are, I think, at least conversations you should be able to have with people where, okay, you just see that we don't want our guns taken away. We're actually looking at, yeah, we don't want our guns taken away. There's a lot of effort and pride and money and enthusiasm put into that. They're not dangerous whatsoever. In some fashions, they are more for everyone's well-being in some fashions, in a mental sense, actually, in a society, in a balanced society. There's people in history that said, a disarmed population is a slave population. There is logic to that, and it comes back to this distribution of power. And what's actually happening at the moment is the power is moving all over to the state, and the only way that the civilians can have any, well, they can't have sovereignty, but they can be compliant, and then if you can do that, then you'll be happy. That's the big picture that I believe is really happening, that really is really very obvious, and without too much research you can verify it. And maybe you can have some conversations with some of those people who just can't see why you just can't just give up your guns, or why it's a problem to you whatsoever, is that, okay, there is some really obvious stuff you can see that says it isn't just about your safety at all. It's much more about your compliance. Anyway, guys, that's that one there for today. I hope it makes some sense. There's a lot more you can put into it. It's just one I needed to sort of add on to or keep going with. It is stuff that you can't just drop the ball. That is the strategy for all of our government situations. Drop the ball, it'll be right, just put your head back in the sand and it'll go away. It's not going away, it's keep coming. So unless you can wake people up, it will keep coming and it will steamroll over you. Anyway, guys, thanks for checking in. We'll catch you next time.